This war is escalating by the hour. Thousands have died on both sides. And currently there's a total siege of Gaza. Just where is this war headed? To get a perspective from Israel, we are joined tonight by Hanoch Milwidsky, a member of the Israeli Knesset, that's the Israeli parliament. He belongs to the Likud Party, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's party. Hanoch Milwidsky, thank you so much for joining us on Global Lens tonight. We're also hoping to be joined in a moment by Brigadier General David Tzur, formerly with the Israel Defense Forces. All right, Hanoch Milwidsky, if I could start with you. There is no denying that this is an impossibly difficult time for Israel. The most horrific and bone-chilling terror attacks in the country's history have been perpetrated by Hamas over the weekend. Now, as the war escalates, as we said, people have been killed on both sides. Could you give us a sense of the latest on the ground? Just what is the situation like at the moment? Okay, can I go across to Brigadier General David Tzur at this point? I hope you can hear me, David. If I could put that question to you.
Yeah, I can hear you. Look, I heard your speech, and I think you described very clearly what kind of attack we suffered. Never Israel faced it like this. I'm not sure even other countries, maybe I can go back to the Holocaust or go back to, ISIS activities, because we're talking on, it's not kind of a legitimate war, or even it's not even terror of an act of terrorism that we are very much experienced on from. I was as a general. I was the general for the border guard during the second Intifada in 2002, 2004, and we suffered a lot of suicide attack, and we had to go into very large operations. But never we saw something like what we saw in our holiday Sabbath, which is the Holy Torah, the end of Sukkot celebration. 6, 7 o'clock in the morning, a massive rockets, which are the coverage for an act of a war, which is invading mainly the peaceful villages and kibbutz, which are on the border. By the way, 90% of them are very peace people, which used to host those Gaza people, to give them labor, and they were kind of working with them and good neighbors for years, and they butchered the kids, babies, took their head off, did unbelievable savage activities. This is something unacceptable in any meaning. We're talking about war crimes. We're talking about like ISIS. We're talking about taking hostages, like more than 130. Some of them were even torn from their parents, were thrown like rubbish on the borders because they didn't want to take them. We're talking about elderly people from 85 to babies, and they're still holding them. So I think, as President Biden said, we have the fully right to act against it, to do all the. It's a war. It's not something which we didn't start with. There was no trigger for that. This is an offensive war against Israel, and we have the full right to protect ourselves. So I think this is the situation, and I think it's going to be a very long war, because this time we need to neutralize the military capabilities of this ISIS, Al-Qaeda, whatever, called Hamas, This is the same ideologic, this is the same groups, and this is our mission today to do it.
This question, there is no doubt that, these terror attacks have caused horror and outrage, I can tell you, not just across Israel, but across the entire world, including here in India. And India has been a victim of multiple terror attacks in the past. As you must be aware, we've had the horrific 26/11 Mumbai terror attacks. And unfortunately, what is unfolding in your country currently is reminiscent of that. But let me ask you this. Thousands and thousands of Israeli troops have been amassed at the border with Gaza, including 300,000 reservists. Are we to understand, David, that after the airstrikes that are being carried out relentlessly at the moment, there is a very strong possibility that we're going to see a ground invasion of Gaza by Israel, because that really is the speculation right now. Can you confirm that? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, of course, I can't address to that in a TV talk show, or even it's very respectable the show. I can't tell you when and if this is going to take place, but definitely, from my experience, it's not something which you can do only from the air, because unfortunately, from our experience and for the years, we know that Hamas is taking shelter underground. Some of the places they're using as the civilians, the citizens, as a shield. Unfortunately, there is a very large collateral damage, which is because of the airstrikes and the other strikes. But differently from this savage attack, we are not aiming against civilians. We are aiming against military targets, which are fortunately, those civilians are being taken like a hostage. And I'm not talking about the Israeli Jewish people who were taken there recently. I'm talking about the Gaza people. Only in the recent year, we opened Gaza for more than 25,000 people coming from Gaza to work, because we understand that they need the money to support the economy of Gaza. We did a lot of humanitarian things to open the borders to Egypt and also from Israel, also to give the money which was coming from Qatar. It was a policy, which actually the policy was saying, as much as we support the civilian population, probably the military activity won't be, they won't have this incentive. Unfortunately, this conception collapsed dramatically this Shabbat, because all the concept that they're going to do demonstration, they do some kind of activities, maybe small activities on the border, in order to gain some sympathy from the world, economic benefits, to recover from the different the places, the infrastructure which they suffered before. All this collapsed in a way that actually we've been manipulated, and I must say this is a very, very shocking surprise, because this concept strategically has been held for years in our government, and even we knew very well the preparation, the military preparation they had, and we knew that it's a state of terror against us, but we thought that they are being deterred, that there is a lot of vectors working against violation in order to remain and to keep this way of living in Gaza. But unfortunately, we saw that it's a terrible surprise for us in this savage attack, which, I mean, words are not enough to describe what we saw when we came to those villages. We saw babies which were shot in the head. Their head was cut off. Parents, full families were confiscated in the shelter houses. Those who didn't open the doors, so they burned the houses on them. It's like horrible films that you can imagine, that you saw it only on films. You can't imagine this kind of things are being done by a human being. So we're talking about a very, very shocking incident, and I think there is a huge consensus now. And also, I don't know if you follow, but a few hours ago, a unity cabinet.
Yes.
Yeah, unity cabinet was established, some of the opposition, with the government in order, because everybody accept, even those who thought that we need to do kind of a peaceful activities with the Palestinians, something, including me, for years. So this is something which definitely it's not time for talking. We need to bring back our hostages to win in this
and
war.
David, I want to talk about the hostages with you in just a moment, but let me now go across to Hanoch Milwidsky, a member of the Israeli Knesset. He belongs to the Likud Party, the ruling party, that's the Prime Minister's party in Israel. Hanoch Milwidsky, thank you so much for joining us here on News9 Live tonight. If I could begin by asking you about exactly what David mentioned just now. Just about an hour or so ago, it was announced that the Prime Minister and the opposition are coming together to form an emergency unity government to respond to this crisis. Could you please put this into perspective for our viewers? What does this really mean? What is the way ahead for Israel at the moment politically?
It means that everybody understands that there's no room for politics when Israel is fighting for its life. And this is what is happening here. We're fighting for our life. We're fighting for our way of living. We're fighting for the future of our daughters and sons. And everybody understands that. Therefore, everybody agrees to put politics aside. And all of us will unite behind this united new government, behind the army, behind our soldiers, until we complete a total victory on those enemies who want to come and kill us. This is what they want to do. They want to kill us. They have shown it too well this past Saturday. The horrors are inconceivable, really. Things that the last time Jews suffered such horrors were under the Nazi regime. We will not let anybody treat us as the Nazis did anymore, and we will treat these Hamas murderers like everybody should treat the Nazis. No mercy and no surrender.
Well, you know, both of you are absolutely right in pointing out that it's not just the scale of these horrific attacks, it's the savagery, the butchery that was involved that has really, shocked the entire world. It is blood-curdling, to say the least, the way children have been treated, babies decapitated, the way women have been treated. There is a lot to talk about, Mr. Milwidsky. If I could just ask you this first. We'll talk about the airstrikes in a moment, but are there fears that there could still be Hamas terrorists holed up inside Israeli cities and towns, and they could still attack your country from within, given that at least 1,500 bodies of Hamas terrorists have already been recovered from Israeli territory, and we really don't know how many managed to sneak into Israel on Saturday?
Yes, the army is moving under that side exactly. The towns and villages that Hamas got hold of are being scanned at the moment, done very slowly. A lot of forces are still over there. And we understand that this is something that could happen. A few terrorists will rise from somewhere, but that is not something that will stop us. And we are now pretty much over the defensive period, and we are looking towards the offensive time. And I think this is something that everybody will see too much time, that we are moving to a very enhanced offensive.
All right. Mr. Milwidsky, I want to ask you a few more questions before I go back to David, since you joined us a little late on the show. My question to you is two-pronged. Correct me if I'm wrong, but rockets have been fired towards Israel from Syria as well as by Hezbollah from Lebanon. Is this in some ways turning into a multi-front war, you think, for Israel? Number one. And number two, is there a very strong likelihood that we're going to see a ground invasion of Gaza next, given that thousands and thousands of Israeli troops, including 300,000 reservists, have been amassed at the border?
Well, I can tell you that both Hamas and Hezbollah are two arms of the same regime, the Iranian regime. They are their proxies. They work in the Middle East through Hamas and Hezbollah. We all heard President Biden very strong speech yesterday, and everybody knows that everybody here is very serious. We hope. We're not looking for war in Lebanon. We're not looking for a military conflict with Hezbollah. But if they make a mistake of starting such an attack, I assure you that they will end up the same way Hamas will end up. That means they will no longer be able to operate or exist, neither in the Gaza Strip or in Lebanon.
All right. And would you want to comment on where this war goes next? Because at the moment we know that it's Israeli airstrikes that are pounding Gaza. Like I asked, could there be a ground invasion next? Is that something you would want to talk about?
Of course, I'm not going to talk into military details now, but I can tell you in a very strong certainty that I think it's very clear now that the state of Israel cannot agree to a Palestinian terror authority, sovereign Palestinian terror authority next to its borders. Therefore, Hamas's regime in Gaza must end in a way that it will not exist anymore. Not exist. Hamas will not exist in the Gaza Strip once this war is over. And to do that, we will take any means necessary. I think you can understand from that answer where things are going.
All right. I understand that you don't want to elaborate on it, but I think you have certainly shared important information with us. But Mr. Milwidsky, I would be remiss in my job as a journalist if I didn't ask you this question. How would you respond to those people, and there are many around the world today, not just Palestinians, who are saying that Israel is committing a war crime by imposing a total siege on Gaza, which is home to 2.3 million people, 2.3 million Palestinians, by depriving them of food, water, electricity and fuel? Because even as you say that you're targeting Hamas and not civilians, fact of the matter is that there are 2.3 million Palestinians living in Gaza, and I'm sure you would agree not all Palestinians represent or are on the side of Hamas. These are, a lot of them are innocent civilians, scores and scores of them are women and children, many of whom have already lost their lives. How would you respond to that allegation that this is a war crime?
Well, we saw the sights and the movies of what happened to Israeli prisoners, men and women, when they were paraded in the streets of Gaza. What happened to them, the mobbing attacks, the lynch attacks. Therefore, you know, when you deal with a Nazi regime, you do not and cannot make these calculations. If you ask me who comes first, my kids or the kids in Gaza, will my kids come first? And I will do anything I can to end this Nazi regime Hamas has in Gaza. We told the population time and time again, they should evacuate. They should leave the cities. They should do that, and they should understand that that Gaza, before this war, will not return to the same. They need to make their own decisions, whether they stay in their homes or they evacuate.
And
But
where
we are
exactly do you
determined.
think they can go? Because, you know, Egypt has said, we don't want an influx of these refugees in our country. Where can they go?
Well, if they go near the border and settle there, nobody will attack civilians near the border. But if they allow Hamas to use them to cover its rocket fire, to cover its terrorists, to use them as human shields, if they allow that, well, I'm sorry. We have taken that into consideration for too long. It ended in this horrible terrorist attacks, murders that we all experienced this coming Saturday. And when you fight such an enemy, you need to make sure that you completely overcome him. You cannot make these decisions. I'm sorry, we are in war. If they are innocent civilians, they should go away from the war zone. If not, they are responsible to what happens to them. We will, and I'm saying that to them, and the IDF spokesman said that to them again and again in Arabic as well. We are going to finish Hamas's regime in Gaza. They should act accordingly.
You say you're going to finish Hamas, but people around the world still wonder how this war is going to end. It's only escalating at the moment and lives are being lost on both sides. David, if I could come back to you at this point, what happens to the hostages? There are close to 150 hostages that are being held by these Hamas terrorists in Gaza. Most of them are Israeli, but there are also foreigners among them, including Americans. While negotiations may be underway, and there have been reports that Qatar is involved, and I know you would not be able to talk about that, it's a delicate matter. But my question to you is, are there not concerns in Israel that as you pound building after building in Gaza, apart from the fact that a lot of Palestinians are used as human shields by the Hamas terrorists, a lot of these hostages who are Israeli people, your people, could be in real danger?
Yeah, well, the hostages, first of all, most of them are civilians, as you said, babies and innocent people, not the military. So, if it's not a Nazi regime or ISIS, so there is no doubt that they should have been released immediately as for humanitarian reason. So when you were asking Hanoch about the humanitarian crisis, etc., so let's talk about the humanitarian issue of those hostages. This is not something which can be accepted. With all the respect to the international community, I think the people, when they were exposed and when they will be exposed more to the scenes which I saw, and some of the most of the people in Israel are devastated by looking on TV and watching that. This is not something comparable. As MP Hanoch said before, we are before we attacking any building, we give them a warning before. It's called knock on the roof. We give them time to evacuate. Something which the babies who were slaughtered in the border didn't have a second. The stories are unbelievable. I want to address also to the question you asked about Lebanon and these areas. First of all, it's a different ball, and Lebanon is not like maybe Gaza. It's a sovereign country which been taken as a hostage maybe by Hezbollah. And we saw what happened there in Beirut in the explosion in the port, where Hezbollah took over half of Beirut and South Lebanon. It's been controlled by this Shia extreme group.
Yes.
And actually, Iran is actually manipulating in this regime.
Yes.
We're saying it for years. I think the international community is very aware about things, or they
Yes.
want to...
Which is why, you know, many have asked, is this just an Israel-Hamas war, or is this also an Israel-Iran war by proxy? But I have run out of time. But gentlemen, of course, like I said earlier, nobody can dispute the fact that the brutality, the barbarism and the savagery that we have seen on display in Israel is something that has shaken the conscience of the entire world. And I can tell you that our thoughts and prayers are with the victims. And we certainly hope that this war ends very, very soon. On that note, Hanoch Milwidsky and Brigadier General David Tzur, thank you so much for joining us on Global Lens tonight. Thank you. All right, time for us to take a quick break here on Global Lens. Don't go anywhere. Coming up on the other side, an exclusive interview with the Palestinian ambassador to India.
Hello everyone, Namaskar. I'm music composer Ricky Cage. Three-time Grammy Award winner and a United Nations Goodwill Ambassador. And you're watching me on First Person on News9 Plus.